It's deranged, royal fae. They'll act crazy all day. They'll apologize for the fail, but still scream and wail. It's deranged, royal fae. Yeah!
Simmer down, have a cup of tea, and let's talk about asexuality. And yes, my outfit is totally the asexual flag in order. Mostly. I didn't have any purple shoes or striped socks for my best option, okay? I could have done purple hosiery, white bottoms, gray top, and black coat or headpiece. But come on! I want to show off these adorable bloomers I hardly wear. Besides, we gotta rep some striped hosiery on this channel. It's kinda my thing. Also, the makeup is inspired by the demisexual flag. So this will be my first Tea Time Tuesday video since rebranding, so that's fun. So, I don't know how many people know this, but I do identify under the asexual spectrum. And yes, I said spectrum. I see myself mainly in the label of demisexual, but I'll get to my own experience later. I just want to start this by saying I do identify as ace, so I have some experience on the topic, but just like every other ace person, I cannot speak for us all. Just like one gay man can't speak for the experience of every gay man, I most certainly cannot speak for every asexual person, nor can one asexual, or even a group of them, talk about us all as a whole. That being said, I have a plethora of ace friends who have shared their own thoughts and experiences of me in the past, so I will also be basing a lot of this on that. I remember back in 2019 when this post first came onto my feed, and whilst I did initially think,
I don't feel like all these are necessary and might seem just a bit far-fetched. Or some of these, I'm not quite sure would even classify as ace, but why the hell should I care?
Seriously, even back then, before I fully embraced my asexual identity, I just thought, why does it matter? Why should any of us care what someone chooses to call or label themselves, if that's what makes them feel most comfortable and happy? It's not like they're asking to always address them by these labels, it's just how they feel best describes their own personal experience. There were comments making fun of a few very specific ones. Some that people were claiming were a way that
cishet people are using this as a way to infiltrate our spaces.
Or
cishet people will use this just to say that they're oppressed.
And then there were some claiming this is why people weren't going to take the LGBT plus community seriously, like he, him lesbians. Y'all, extreme conservatives weren't going to take us seriously no matter what. And besides, why should we even care about trying to pander to their idea of normal or socially acceptable? If people are more accepting to the idea of just not having to fit labels, not having to live a very specific way, it won't just help LGBT plus folks, but a lot of monogamous cishet ones. And besides, why would I want a group of people where half of them can't even commit to seeing marriage through? A concept they didn't really even create in the first place, but had the goal to claim was purely for them and don't let anyone else have. And then go and squander it in front of people begging for it. I don't know. I have a hard time taking that one seriously. All the same, whilst I might not fully take seriously a lot of the micro-identities, I really don't care. You found a term you think works for you? Good for you, my guy. You do you. End of story. Something I really haven't understood about a lot of LGBT plus spaces, especially the ones that claim they want to be seen as normal and accepted by the mainstream, is that a lot of them want to gatekeep and often not allow monogamous allosexual cishet allies in. Heck, a lot of them don't even allow cishet asexuals. I was part of a trans server that didn't want to allow my cis partner to join, when very obviously he was loving and accepting of me and my identity. So he wasn't going to be a bigot. So fucking what if a cishet person is in your space? Isn't that what you're fighting for? Like, yeah, I understand feeling safe around those you feel solidarity with, but we're all just people, and one's identity, sexuality, gender, sex, race, whatever, is not gonna dictate whether or not you're a good person. I know bad trans people. I know bad queer people. I know bad cis women. And I know bad asexuals. I think it's counterproductive to whatever cause we're supposed to be fighting for when we say,
"Hey you, cis hat! You can't be here, you're not queer enough!"
when what we should probably use as criteria for excluding people in safe spaces is how shitty of a person they are and how accepting they are of you as a person. Our sexual and gender identities isn't all there is to us. And to them either. I know, shocking! Also, might I add that just because you're labeled or label yourself as something doesn't mean you have to fit every single checkbox of that label? That's like saying because someone has schizophrenia, they have to have every single symptom. That's not how you meet criteria for any disorder or health condition. Why should it be the case of identities? Labels are such a personal thing when it comes to identity. It's only just what feels most comfortable for you, and to easily explain what you feel about yourself without having to get into all the details. And then there was a time I posted this. It was part of a collection that I created unrelated to Pride Month, but ended up posting it during the month since it felt appropriate to do so. Basically, the concept was about saying F it to most gender and sexual norms, or even stereotypes and misconceptions in LGBT plus spaces and the likes. It was about love and acceptance for everyone, and just to stop gatekeeping and let people be themselves in non-harmful ways. And whoo boy, I had people who were not happy about some of these messages. Like, when I had about how Pride isn't just for LGBT plus people that allies should be welcome to. People got on my case for the use of the ally flag. Like what? Did you want me to use the pride flag to describe these characters who weren't LGBT plus in this piece of artwork? I also had some people misunderstand the message of some, like the one where I was saying that lesbians can date trans women and still be lesbian. Someone agreed with the message, but misunderstood my phrasing, so I guessed to mean the opposite? Which I suppose is fair. It's fair. When I posted the specific ace one, as it wasn't my only ace one, someone called me a clown. And yeah, maybe I could have worded this better, but it definitely shows some misconceptions as to what asexual can entail. And not every asexual person lives their life the same. And also, might I add that because someone had sex, doesn't mean they enjoyed it. I'm gonna go two places with this one. Concept A. If a lesbian were to have had sex with a cis man in the past, and this was one of her ways of confirming her sexuality, and she's like, yeah, never again. You'd probably get some shit for saying she's not really a lesbian. So, if an ace person were to have sex and realize, nah man, don't like it, how is that so different? And to my next point, saying doing something is the same as enjoying something is just so obviously not true. Almost all of us did homework as kids, but I would say a majority probably did not enjoy most of our assignments. We have to do chores, and whilst I'm a weirdo who sometimes enjoys cleaning my house, if only for dopamine high and finally getting the structure and space and feeling like I've been productive, a lot of people hate cleaning or most chores. But we do them. In most cases, we have to. In some cases, we feel obligated to. This is going to tie in to how ace people, in my opinion, earn a place in the LGBT plus community as their own unique form of oppression. Do you realize just how sex-driven our society is? And also how naturally sexual humans and a lot of creatures that reproduce in a similar way are? There is usually such an emphasis about sex, whether it's to have it or not, Usually this is a very gender or biological sex-based constructed by society standards. But at the end of the day, there's such a push from most families that their child gets married and have babies. Okay. I know my folks were constantly sexualizing me, whether or not they meant to. When they assumed that any time I would be spending the night with my now ex-fiance in their room, it meant we were gonna be banging it out. Ha! That made me fucking uncomfortable. So they kept me from sharing a room or sleeping in their room overnight. But we could hang out any other time. We could both sleep on the couch together. Clearly, they didn't think we were very imaginative. All the same, I've started to realize with the push that teaching that love and sex is the same thing really personally did me wrong. Incredibly recently, actually. A lot of asexual people are kind of pushed into the idea that they have to have sex. And some of us end up doing so when we get into relationships. And that can be really harmful. Not just to the ace person, but also to their partner. If you're only having sex with them because you're obligated to, because you're just going through the motions, it's kind of not a good reason to have sex at the end of the day. And it's kind of dishonest to both you and your partner. I know my partners would have felt awful, like they violated me in some way or did something that made me uncomfortable, should they had known how I truly felt inside. I'm guilty of this, and I feel more bad for my partners than for myself. Most of that time, I was still learning what the heck sexual attraction or interest in sex even was. So I can't really blame the me of the far past too much for it. And this push can be said about a lot of people who are raised to be women and how they have to feel inclined to think of themselves like baby makers. And then for queer people and how they feel like they have to be straight and sleep with someone of the opposite sex. And do not get me started on the pressures a lot of people raised to be men feel about having sex to be considered a man or a real man. It's the mentality of how these issues that us LGBT plus people fight for is not just for us or our separate identities. It's for fucking everyone. Now, I'd like to go over some common misconceptions of asexuality. First off, I'm going to start with the whole asexuality, like every other LGBT identity, which has been labeled as such in the past, is not a mental condition. It's not something that's triggered by medications, etc., etc. I don't need to fucking explain, okay? That's just how it is. Like, that's how every LGBT identity is. Not a medical condition. You can't cure it. You can't treat it. And it's not a product of abuse. Yeah, maybe some people who are ace might be sex repulsed because of that, but they ain't ace because of abuse. Maybe some abuse victims might put off sex for a long time because of the abuse, but that does not make them ace. You can be ace and you can be a sexual abuse victim. They ain't related. Okay, there we go. Getting those harebrained ideas out of the way, and we're gonna deep dive into some things. For one, not all asexual people are sex repulsed. By that, I don't mean having sex. I mean just being comfortable or uncomfortable with a topic of it. Some ace people absolutely cannot stand the idea of seeing sex or being around it, talking about it. But some asexual people really don't care. Or even in some cases, really enjoy talking about it. But not necessarily to participate. To understand it a little better, it's not too different from a gay person not feeling uncomfortable seeing straight people kissing on TV. And it's 100% valid though if you are sex repulsed or uncomfortable with seeing acts of PDA. Honestly, to a mild extent, I can be pretty sex repulsed, especially in public settings. Like, even in my old polycule, when my girlfriend would start to make out with her other girlfriend, I would just get really uncomfortable and just turn away. And I feel really uncomfortable with people sexualizing me, partners included. Whether it be verbally or physically, like an ass grab, even in complete private. I have only one person that's an exception, and this ties to my demi-identity. That being said, I have absolutely no problem with porn. Am I allowed to say that? And I know this is the case for other ace people who refrain from sexual activities, and honestly, my lack of aversion to it really kept me from realizing I was ace. And as an added note, masturbation and sex are completely different things. The pleasure you get from one is honestly not the same as the other. It's a completely different conversation that you're having with yourself versus one that you're having with someone else. All the same, not to digress further, most sex-repulsed ace people probably want absolutely nothing to do with any allusion to sex. And that's fair. I imagine that's really hard for a lot of them given a lot of the content out there though. Another misconception is that not all asexual people are this thing called aromantic. So not all asexual people are uninterested in dating. The male people think that, oh, you're ace, you don't want relationships. Don't get me wrong. There's probably plenty of aro ace people, but that's not really the rule. I won't say it's an exception. I don't know the statistics on this to really confirm if it's more or less common. Some ace people can even identify as straight, gay, bi, etc. Though you normally say they're bi-romantic, not say it bisexual. It'd be like bi-romantic, asexual, yeah. And so on and so forth depending on the identity. This can be tricky for a lot of ace people, because what happens when you fall in love with someone allosexual? What, do ace people just date other ace people? Honestly, this is somewhere where polyamory can kind of be helpful for ace people. Not saying everyone can do polyamory, but if you're cool with it, then being an ace person with an allosexual partner in a polyamorous dynamic kind of lifts that pressure to have sex with your partner if you are uninterested in participating. But if you are in a monogamous relationship, and one person is ace and the other is also allo, there's plenty of directions this can go, and it's really up to the two of you to decide. This leads to another misconception. Not all asexual people refrain from sex. There's a number of reasons for this, and yeah, if you want to bring up the subgroups or micro-identities, that obviously would explain those. But I actually just mean straight up asexuals have no sexual attraction or desire for sexual activity. One example of this would go hand in hand with the idea of dating an allosexual partner, especially whilst being monogamous. Maybe you're not really interested in sex, but you want to participate because it's a form of intimacy only the two of you will share. Other reasons can be a bit more harmful, such as you're doing it for the thrill and as a form of self-harm. No actual enjoyment or interest in it, just like someone who might cut the wrist because they feel compelled to in order to feel something. It's really different person to person. That being said, some ace people can enjoy sex, not including the subgroups. And if you look at the definition for asexuality, it leaves room for this, as it reads, asexuality is the lack of sexual attraction to others, or low or absent interest in the desire for sexual activity. Sexual attraction does not equal whether or not you enjoy sex. Neither does the lack of desire to partake in the activity. And then you could include the whole low interest as a hint for this. And this brings me to the last misconception that comes to mind for this video. Kink. Ooh, boy, we're getting spicy now. Or are we? Fun fact, kink does not equal sex. They can both coexist, but you can have one without the other. There's plenty of stuff in BDSM that would never be defined as sex, such as no touching of genitals or sexual reproductive organs, primary or secondary. Obviously, not all kink is BDSM, it just feels like the easiest example. All this being said, some asexual people are into kink, and are still not interested in sex. They aren't the same thing, and that's okay. Say it with me, folks, because you know it's my go-to word, valid. Oh, sorry, you're new here or didn't realize that? Let's try this again. Valid! Extra royal here for something I realized I totally did not include in the script, but was something I thought about when trying to set up this entire thing. I noticed this interesting thing where gender crits, or a lot of people might know them as TERFs, but I don't like calling them TERFs because they don't fit my definition of feminism, so I don't like calling them feminists. But they want to be called gender crits, so I'm going to respect what they want to be called and like what they do to trans people. Yeah, also, as you notice, I'm in the other ace outfit, ha ha ha. But yes, so I noticed a lot of these gender crits are shitting on asexuality. The subcategories especially, and I think that's worth at least pointing out. And some of them were like, oh, we didn't call that asexuality, we just called that normal back in the day. And it's kind of like a little counterintuitive to be like, back in the time where things were more sexist, when women were expected to not enjoy sex because of sexist things, that was a normal. That is not sexist. And I'm like, I don't know. I feel like it's pretty damn sexist to say that women just naturally just don't enjoy sex. Humans are naturally sexual. You want to... I know we're not monkeys, but you want to look at bonobos? Even the females have sex as a way to exchange things. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you're just demisexual if you're not experiencing sexuality. Or maybe you're just gray sexual. Honey, I don't know what to tell you, but you probably ain't. You might not be allosexual. I've got news for you, darling. Like, I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting the way gender crits have started a war now, not only against trans people, but asexual people, especially with the categories. So yeah, I just thought that was something worth mentioning. Yeah. I know this video is probably going to be long as is, but I did kind of promise in the beginning I would talk about my own asexual or demisexual identity and the journey I've been on to really feel comfortable labeling myself as these terms. You see, I've had quite the handful of sexual partners in my past, all of them also being my romantic partner, but not that there's any shame in not. Even in my very recent past. And they've all been learning experiences to this aspect about myself. My most recent two especially. I'd say my biggest A-crack when it came to partners and revealing this fact about me is my current sweetheart. He's the only one I've ever felt true and honest sexual attraction to, and the only one I've absolutely wanted to, well, you know. I like him seeing me sexually, which, as I stated earlier, never really liked before, though I usually kept that part quiet or came with excuses for not being into it in the moment. I had such an attachment to my sweetheart, I really want to take our relationship to a monogamous dynamic. Recently, we thought we could try to open back up to non-monogamy. So, I got involved with someone. And as the saying goes, but on a literal sense, I fucked around and found out. And honestly, I wish I hadn't, for a number of reasons. I felt incredibly dishonest to myself, first and foremost, because I knew I wasn't actually sexually attracted to this person, nor was I earnestly romantically attracted. We vibed to a certain extent, but mostly bonded over solidarity about our health, both mentally and physically. As an empath, I wanted to protect her, and I'm kind of just a naturally flirty person without really meaning it, and that gets misconstrued a lot to me having genuine sexual interest. She quickly took interest in me, and it felt like this is what everyone wanted me to do, for lack of better words. So I went through the motions. I had no NRE, no real lust for her, but I was curious. I kept trying to chalk it down to my depression, that maybe I wasn't feeling anything because of that. But I knew the truth. At the very least, I warned her from the beginning, and every day I interacted with her that this was probably going to be the case. And I kept hesitating getting close because I didn't want to hurt her. And recently, with the concerns that I could have a bipolar disorder along with personality disorder, knowing I'm so fucking depressed and missing my sweetheart, so it's like a fucking rebound, it was really fucking stupid of me. And I'm not going to excuse it as, oh, whoops, manic episode made me slip into her bed. You can't blame me. Because that's not fair to say. Now, I know for sure I don't feel comfortable identifying as anything but demisexual. Out of my long history of partners, only one person has ever done anything for me in that way. Out of all the people I've ever met in the world or seen in media, there's only been one person I thought, holy heck, I want to bone you. I don't know. That feels like I'm not allosexual. And I'll elaborate further on that second bit. Me realizing a lot of allosexual people seeing someone and saying they're hot or attractive, at least people who meet their sexual orientation, generally meant that they wanted to have sexual relations with that person, or at the very least were sexually attracted and would not be opposed to having sex. Obviously everyone is different, so like having sex so they meet how the other criteria, like being romantically involved or emotionally, etc., etc. Yeah, go on a date first, things like that. But realizing that and realizing that I've never personally experienced that, my sweetheart being the only exception, really put things into a certain perspective for me. Realizing that I don't actually enjoy sex. It's like an exception. Yeah. I just like pleasing people, sexually or otherwise. That I found sex to be too boring to want to engage in, and something that most of the time wasn't worth it. And that I don't like my partners to touch me sexually in most contexts. That I can be kind of prudish about myself, and so many other things. It was like, holy shit! I couldn't do the math before with the lack of understanding I had not only about asexuality, but allosexual people, and how I can't relate to them over a lot of things. Because I enjoyed porn and masturbation. I write and draw a bunch of lewd content. I was not opposed to having sex with partners, until it actually came down to having sex with my partners. I found people attractive, maybe wanted romance from them, or thought I did, but didn't realize that wasn't the same thing as wanting sexual intimacy from them. I just thought that's how things were. And that's my own personal experience and journey. I can't say how many people will relate to this, but I know there are a few who will. But this video isn't about me. It's about asexuality as a whole, or to at least educate people. Whether they are allosexual and don't get the ace thing, gatekeepers, or even people who are ace and just don't realize it because of the misconceptions. I mostly can only speak from my own lens and view and experiences and share the ones I know from others. So I hope this has been insightful to whomever may stumble upon it. Maybe you might even relate and feel a sense of solidarity. Or you can chill out and realize not to take everything so damn seriously and strictly. I hope you've enjoyed your cup of tea, and I'll be seeing you at the next party. Thank you for watching. Have a gay day.
Well, they're glad that you stayed, yet you wasted yet another day. Their videos are a bore, but they've got lots more in store. It's deranged. Royal Fae. Yeah.